Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm giving the astrology report for the new moon in Aries, which takes place on the Friday the 5th of April at 8:50 AM Universal Time, which translates as 9:50 AM here in the UK because the clocks are forward for the summer. Now we're outlining some of the key aspects and themes indicated by the new moon and give an overview of what it all means. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what kind of opportunities for growth are presented to us at this time. It gives us an idea of how we can make best use of the energies at this time for our own personal growth. But for anything to actually change, it requires that we work in tandem with the process and that we seek to work with the natural cycles rather than trying to fight against them. And it also requires that we make sure that our actions or our choices are guided by wisdom and not just impulse and fear, in order for us to avoid creating karma for ourselves and to make sure that we're growing in the right kind of direction. Now, in terms of the new moon in Aries, this is, as usual, it's a time for setting intentions or a time for setting new beginnings in our lives, because this is where the kind of subconscious desire and the sense of self-identity merge together. So this is a time where seeds of new beginnings can be sown. So it's a time for kind of reflecting on what do we want to be achieving, what goals do we wish to set for ourselves that matter to us, and what kind of areas of growth do we want to target at this time. So with the new moon in Aries, the key areas of potential growth we're looking at is the initiating new beginnings. It's about cultivating the courage required to push through any fears that stand in the way of us and our goals. Because courage isn't about the absence of fear, it's the capacity that allows us to rise above our fears and to continue to take action no matter how many fears, doubts or insecurities emerge when we're trying something new that we haven't tried before. This is also a time where we may decide to try and discover new aspects about ourselves through doing something new which pushes us beyond our comfort zones and allows us to identify or learn new capacities or develop new capacities that we didn't realise we had. And this is a time for also looking at learning to assert ourselves. This doesn't mean aggression, it doesn't mean anger or anything like that. By assertiveness, it's the ability to be clear on who we are, to set clear-cut boundaries and impose them establish them with love. So it's not about demanding or being controlling of other people or anything like that, or blindly asserting. It's about that calm, collected approach where we make it clear that these are our boundaries, this is what we will and won't tolerate in terms of people's behaviour towards us, but it's delivered in a calm and loving way. It's not done in an angry and aggressive kind of way, because assertiveness is not the same as aggressiveness. It's also a time for seeking to express ourselves more authentically and to be honest and frank with other people about who we are, whilst obviously at the same time making sure that we respect who they are as well, because they're also going through the same transit as us. It's about respecting the uniqueness of each individual, it's respecting other people's needs, but making clear or standing our own ground if people are expecting us to not do what's right for us in order to satisfy their needs. So it's having that courage to stand up for ourselves, but it's not about trying to usurp control or outdo other people, as it were. Now, in terms of areas that we also need to be mindful of, is we need to be careful of anger, because Aries can become very angry if we languish in the shadow side of it. Because at the higher level, Aries is about assertiveness, it's about that capacity to stay true to who we are and to make objective decisions based on clear-headed thinking rather than being blinded by anger, passion or impulsiveness and or impatience. So if we recognise that we're the sort of person who struggles with patience or struggles with respecting other people's boundaries or struggles with anger, then this may be a time where we decide, actually these are things we want to learn to overcome, so we want to develop a greater degree of self-awareness to understand why we behave in that way. Because self-awareness is another property of Aries at its higher level. It's cultivating that degree of self-awareness where we know what our kind of triggers are. We know what causes us to lose our temper or act in an impatient way, and we actively seek to address these areas, so we're not blindly asserting ourselves, or we're not trying to be so desperate to achieve our goals that we run roughshod over other people in the process. So it's about having that capacity to stay true to who we are, but also respecting the fact that other people have their own needs, and we can't really expect them to give up or give up their own desires for us if we're not prepared to do the same for them, as it were. So it's honouring one another, but making sure that we honour ourselves in all engagements. So it's to thine own self be true. So this is a good opportunity for looking at how can we learn to assert ourselves in a healthy and loving kind of way. Where do we need to set boundaries so that we don't get run over by other people, and make it clear that we won't tolerate people trying to use us for their own goals without any wish to help us out in the process. So boundaries are a clear and key part of this process. Also honouring and respecting the boundaries of other people around us. So if we do feel anger rising up, one of the things we can learn to practice is to breathe first before we say or do something. It's through that breathing that we can take the energy of the anger out and be left with that calm assertiveness, so our minds are clear to establish the right course of action, so it's right action, right mind, as it were. So now, in terms of the aspects to this particular new moon, Pallas Athena retrograde is opposite this new moon. It's not quite exact, but it's still pretty potent. And Pallas Athena retrograde in Libra is all about seeking to reconcile opposites. So it reminds us that, as important as it is to assert ourselves, we also need to make sure that we embrace qualities like tact and diplomacy at the same time when we're asserting our goals, so we don't create unnecessary adversity for ourselves through alienating other people or running roughshod over them. So it's about staying true to who we are, but honouring and respecting other people in the process. And it's also looking at other ways that we can do things more effectively through cooperation with other people. So are there goals which will aid with our self-discovery, but will also be beneficial for other people and will allow cooperation to be used, and diplomacy and tact, rather than just blind assertiveness or blind aggression, as it were, when faced with any obstacles. So it's having that willingness to see where diplomacy and tact will serve as a wiser strategy in the long run, compared to just asserting ourselves willy-nilly without thinking about the potential ramifications it can have on other people and the risk of burning bridges without meaning to. So it's recognising where we need to keep those bridges with other people strong, even whilst we're busy cultivating new goals for ourselves that will foster our own greater self-awareness and greater self-empowerment. This new moon is also square to Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. So Capricorn square to the Aries Libra axis reminds us that in respect to any kind of seeking autonomy or seeking independence, we must also recognise that everything that we do is subject to natural laws, and these laws will play out through karma if we're not careful. So it's important that whenever we're taking these actions, that we be mindful of making sure that it's done in a way that is in alignment with the natural laws. So we recognise that what we put out, we get back. So if what we're doing is causing or creating problems for other people, that will then reflect back to us at some point. Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn also reminds us the necessity for patience, discipline and perseverance when pursuing goals. Some goals can manifest quickly, but a lot of them, especially if the goals intended to create radical changes in our lives, will require patience and discipline to stick to them in the face of old habits that would otherwise hold us back or pull us away from these new areas of growth. So Saturn and Pluto remind us of the need for discipline to make sure that we stay committed to the goals that we set, that we don't just give up at the first hurdle, and we don't fall into patterns of blame when things don't go according to plan. So it's having that capacity to make sure that discipline is adhered to at all times. So self-discipline, self-awareness and self-focus. And it's also that perseverance in the face of any obstacles, because obstacles are a necessary part of life because they challenge us to push ourselves higher than we've gone before and develop a deeper level of inner resilience and deeper level of resourcefulness, because it's resourcefulness that allows us to adapt our goals in the long run when faced with obstacles. So rather than giving up when we see an obstacle, we use that discipline and that patience and that objectivity to see how can we adapt our approach to things. So we don't necessarily have to change the goal, but we may need to change our plan of attack or our angle of approach and seek to change the way we do it. Whilst the Pluto element of it is reminding us that if any goal is going to last in the long run or manifest ultimately in our own lives, it has to be an honest reflection of who we are. It has to resonate with our soul and not just be something that will bring us social status, but deep down we know it's not actually right for us, and no matter how successful we get at it, we feel like a fraud doing it. So for any goal to be worthwhile, it has to honour who we are and it has to feel right for who we are, so that the whatever goal or legacy we're seeking to achieve is basically honouring who we are. So it's expressing our core sense of self in the public domain, so that we carve that specific niche that allows us to express ourselves and feel at home in the world. So this particular new moon has its certain challenges presented to us, but if we're prepared to embrace patience, prepared to embrace discipline, perseverance and focus, then we can make these goals that we set for ourselves achievable. We can manifest them in our own lives, but it's up to each and every one of us to have that patience and discipline, and also that awareness of the need to honour the needs of other people and respect other people's right to pursue their own goals, so that we don't run roughshod over other people. We understand that if the way we treat other people to some extent is a reflection of ourselves, it's overcoming any blind impulsiveness, but cultivating that courage, that and that assertiveness necessary to stand our own ground, to face any fears within ourselves, and to maintain a commitment to the new goals in the face of any fears that come up, so that old conditioning doesn't pull us back into negative habits. Because whenever things start changing in our lives, fear often raises its head because it's based on keeping us in a comfort zone, but there's no growth in that comfort zone. We have to step outside of it in order for us to develop new capacities and learn new elements about ourselves that we weren't aware of. And it's through this willingness to have that courage to take action, to change our approach to things, we can maximise our growth, we can achieve great projects in our lives, and we can make significant change in our lives to break free of the old and start a new path of growth in our lives, and making sure that it empowers ourselves, but it's also done in a way that respects other people in the process. So may this new moon bring you many opportunities for significant growth, and may whatever goals you set for yourselves manifest in your life and empower you going forwards. Take care and be blessed.